There's no magic sky man who just, takes care of me every single day. Joe has to do the work. I have to say no to drinks. I have to, be a kind person. I have to do all the things that they tell you. I have to look at myself at the end of the day. Like those things I do. And I want to recognize myself for the fact that I did those things.
Hey guys, what's going on? I felt as though it would be appropriate to just give you a quick intro to this upcoming episode 31 with Joe. It was a great conversation, and you'll notice when you get into it that it's the first conversation that we've had here on the Stack and Days podcast where I'm sitting live with a guest. I had the good fortune of being able to travel to Kenya a few weeks back and spent basically 10 days with 10 other folks of color, Black and brown folks, all on their own independent journeys with sobriety. And over the course of those 10 days, I was able to sit down with not only Joe, but with another guest that will come up in a subsequent interview. But all to say that the conversation with Joe was so deep and it covered so much that we ended up having to break the chat down into two separate episodes. So you'll catch the first half, which is episode 31 now, and then you'll catch episode 32 next week as we kind of wrap up the conversation. But just to give you a sense of what we're going to be talking about in the first half of the conversation, everything from Joe's relationship with alcohol, where it stemmed from, the many toxic relationships that she was in. We also cover some very heart-wrenching items and topics of discussion around the suicide of her son. So all to say that it was a really deep conversation that I hope that you guys enjoy. One other point of note is that I do apologize for the audio quality. As I mentioned, we were recording this in the middle of Kenya, and it wasn't as clear as if we were sitting here today. So hopefully down the line, we'll be able to do more of these sorts of kind of in-person conversations. But in the meantime, please enjoy this one with Joe. I had not only the fortune of getting to spend a lot of time with her over the course of 10 days, but we took a couple hours at the end of one of those days to have this conversation. So sit back, relax, and find the similarities, not the differences, and just enjoy. Thank you. Talk soon. Bye. Hey y'all, what's going on? This is Ray Donovan. Welcome back to the Stack and Days podcast, where we highlight underrepresented journeys of sobriety from within the BIPOC community. I'm really excited today for a few reasons. One, this is our first show that we are recording in real life, in person. So that's extremely special. Number two, you can't tell, but we're actually sitting in the middle of Lamu, Kenya right now. So Joe, who's our guest today, and we've been on this almost 10-day sober sojourn in Kenya. So we spent several days in Nairobi, in the Masai Mara, and now we're in Lamu, which is this beautiful beach community way out in the middle of nowhere. But we felt as though that we wanted to take the opportunity to sit down and chat a little bit. I've been catching snippets of Joe's story over the last couple of days, and I'd be remiss if we didn't actually sit down and get into it a little bit. So Joe's got an amazing story. I only know, the tip of the iceberg, but I'm sure we're going to get into her journey deeply. I'm sure we're going to be talking about grief and honestly, like the success of entrepreneurialism. I mean, just Joe's dynamic. So take us from the beginning of your story, your relationship with alcohol. Where did it start? What was your why? And then we'll kind of just chronologically progress through those days into the bridge that led you to your sobriety.
Yeah, I remember my first alcoholic beverage pretty well. I remember feeling, I moved to Texas when I was like 12. And so we came to Texas for religious reasons. My mom got saved during the the 70s, like when the early 70s, when there was like a Jesus movement. And if you're younger, you won't understand that at all. But if you're older, you'll get it. So we moved to Texas from New York, and it was very, very, I felt very unsafe in my life because it was like my mom came home one day, or I came home from school one day. My mom says, "Hey, I got us packed and we're leaving for Texas tomorrow." And I was 12, living in New York, like I could not even imagine why I was being taken to Texas. And then my mom was leaving my dad at the time. So there was that also. And we just got on a plane, came to Texas, and it was pretty traumatic for me. And then the fact that I had not been raised in church, I had never been to church like in my whole life. And then at 12, my mom just throws us into church like nonstop. We were Assembly of God, so we spent a lot of time in the church, and everything is prohibited. There's no singing, no dancing, no like no alcohol. But I remember we were at one of our church events, and we were at a skating rink, and somebody has a bottle of like apple brandy or something like that.
At a church event.
Yeah, and so like we're in the bathroom. I remember being in the bathroom, and somebody's like, "Hey, you want to try some?" And I was like, like I've always been a like I say yes to everything. And plus, it was like I wanted to fit in. Like all these people were drinking, and here I am, like 13 years old, and all these people are drinking, and I'd never done it before, and I was a little nervous about like what if I get caught, but I did it. And I remember that feeling, that first, like that warm rush that you get when you drink, especially something like a brandy or a bourbon or something. That warmth, I remember it feeling throughout my whole body and thinking, wow, this is nice. And I remember like immediately afterwards thinking, calm down, like this would be cool to do this again, there was only one bottle of brandy, so it didn't like go very far, and everybody only had one drink. But I remember that was the first time that I drank. And then it was probably pretty long before that happened to me again. But then in high school, many of my friends drank. And so I was exposed to alcohol more frequently. And I was not allowed, because I'm Christian, Assembly of God. I'm not allowed to go to parties. I'm not allowed to hang out. I'm not allowed to date. I didn't even go on my first date till I was 18 years old. So not allowed to date. And I have to, like be home by whatever time. And I found this group of girls that became my best friends in high school. I didn't have very many friends. I came from a very large family, and we didn't have much money. And my parents made me start working when I was 15 years old. And I had this job, and I had to give my parents my paycheck. And then I said to my mom, like if I could work another job, can I keep a paycheck from my other job so I could have some money, like
Right.
like buy a car, or like drive a car, or give my friends money for gas or whatever. So my mom said, yeah, sure. And so I did. And here I am, 15 years old, working two jobs just so that I can help support my family. And then I had five brothers and sisters, and parents they were not good parents. They didn't have any right to, bring six kids into the world, because my mom would watch the kids. She drank pretty frequently. My dad didn't drink that much. We didn't really grow up around drinking a lot, except for that my grandfather, he was an alcoholic. He was the get home from work beer, like my grandmother serves him his beer, and he would just drink beer all night long. But it was just like, oh, grandpa drinks beer.
Yeah,
it wasn't like, yeah, like he's not an alcoholic or anything. It's just like he just drinks beer. So it's like really didn't get to be around it. Then I got with this group of girls, and a lot of them drank, and they drank a lot. Like it was definitely binge drinking situations. And we were also, we had, like some eating disorders. And on top of that, this group of girls, we would, I'm just gonna be totally transparent. We would go, and we would go to like, like all the fast food places in a row, and we'd eat as much food as we could, and then, we'd purge, and then we drink, and it was like this really vicious cycle all through high school. I got married pretty young. My senior year of high school, I met somebody who was way older than me, and he it was like my ticket to get out of the house, to not have to take care of my brothers and sisters anymore. If I, like if I could just marry this guy.
Was he part of your?
No, he was actually the manager at the grocery store that I worked at.
Okay.
So he was a very heavy drinker. Very heavy drinker. I didn't know that when we first met. but we did wind up getting divorced like literally a year later because of his drinking. He was a little violent and abusive, so I had to get out of that relationship. But so I drank a lot during my senior year in high school. But I remember like in Dallas where I lived, the drinking age was 18. You could drink at 18, and then once I turned 18, like a few months later, it turned to 21. But so on my 18th birthday, I was like, I'd been drinking a lot. Like I'll drink a lot, Boone's Farm wine, whatever, like shots of whatever. And I remember on my birthday, I was supposed to go out with my friends, and I called my mom, told her, didn't call her because we didn't have phones back then, but I saw her and I was like, hey, I'm going to go with my friends and we're going to go to a bar tonight because now I'm old enough to go to a bar. And when I got to the bar, I was like, I don't even want to drink tonight because it was kind of like at that phase where I'm just like, I'm kind of over drinking. Instead, I ate a pot pie. So I moved out and I'm with this guy that drinks basically every single day. And I start drinking wine. I love wine. I've always loved wine. And so that was in the White Zinfandel days. And so I drank regularly with him. And then there were so many arguments and fights, and the abuse would be on the heels always of, like drinking, like a drinking episode. But like I never thought at that age that was like anything big, any big deal. We wound up getting a divorce a year later, and I wound up meeting somebody a couple of years after that. And I would drink socially, like I would go out with my friends and drink and whatever. I met this guy. I mean, this is in my late 20s, and I want to have all my babies by the time sorry, let me go back. I met another guy a little bit after that, and then I had my first son, and he was also abusive and an alcoholic. So here's the pattern, right? I'm meeting these guys, and these are the guys. So my oldest son, him and I were like him and me and his dad were together. We did not want to get married. When I got pregnant, it was accidentally, and I wasn't expecting it. And we did not want to. I didn't want to marry him. I didn't want to do anything. Like I was just like, hey, you could just go, and that'll be fine. I'll let you know when I have the baby. But it didn't work out that way. Everybody was like, you should get married. So we got married, and that only lasted another year. He was extremely abusive, extremely abusive. It was my first situation where like I couldn't go to work because I had a black eye, kind of abusive. So we wound up splitting up, and then I met this third guy, and I met him through my sister, and he seemed like a nice guy. We went on a date, and we immediately connected, and like within a month, we decided to get married. He was a drinker also, and he drank regularly. So that was just what kept happening. Is that I just kept drinking and just kept drinking, and I never really thought about it being a problem. And then I went to go work for Sprint, which was Nextel at the time, and it escalated quickly because I was always traveling for work, and I was, a top performer because I've always been the kind of person. It didn't matter how much I drank, I could still like get up in the morning, go to work, and I could exactly like none of that mattered. So I didn't really think that much, but I can remember just like every morning getting up and thinking, I got a hangover again. Please God, if you don't let me drink today, I won't ever drink again. Like the same promises I kept making myself every single day. Like this. The hangovers were horrible. And then by like 4 in the afternoon, 5 o'clock, my friends were like, hey, you want to go get a drink? And then there it goes. I was drinking again. And at that point is when I noticed that it started to get pretty bad. There's those little 4-packs of wine that you see in the store. Yep. So I would carry that around in my car, and I would call it, like, what if I have a wine emergency? I need to have wine close by. So then I started noticing this is a problem. Like you're carrying the wine around with you just in case. Like there's places for you to buy wine everywhere. You don't have to put it in your car. Right. And it was dangerous because I was like drinking while I was driving. Like I had a long commute back home from where my office was. And so sometimes it could be up to 2 hours depending on traffic. So I would just, pop open one and put in a plastic cup in my car and be drinking on the way home. And it was a problem, but I was like, it's not a problem. Like I work hard, I worked 60 hours a week and I had this long ride ahead of me. So I didn't really think that much about it. But I knew that I couldn't stop. I didn't know how to stop. And I didn't really want to stop at that point in my life.
Was anybody around you at that time kind of raising the flag, or
No.
pretty much in a culture where
everybody was. Everybody was. My friends, my family, everybody was. It was like, and the bigger part was like, Joanne's a wino, because I drank wine all the time. So like I had a hat, it said WINEAUX, so it's the French spelling of wino. So it's kind of like a running joke about Joanne and her wine. And I would be at parties and stuff, and I wouldn't like show up miserably drunk. I was pretty tame drunk, but then I started to notice that the intake was continued to get higher and higher, right? So me and my ex, he's now my ex, but the man I had my next two sons with, the one that I was with for a while, he just one day decided that there was a lot. So there was some racial issues. He was white and Hispanic, and his family didn't really approve of me to begin with.
And he's a Texan. He was a Texan.
He's a Texan, and so there were some other things that happened, and my mom reaches out to me. Me and my mom, we don't have a good relationship our whole life, and there's a part that I left out. When I turned 18 and I decided to move out, my mom decided to leave. So I had brothers and sisters that were small. The twins, my twin brother and sister, were only a year old. Had a brother that was like 2.5, and my other brothers and sisters. And my mom, like when I leave, there's nobody there to take care of those kids anymore. And my mom just finds a man and she leaves my dad, and she leaves the kids. She calls me. She's like, "You're going to have to help your dad because I'm leaving." And my mom took the car. She took all the money that was in the bank account, and she left. And we didn't see her for 2 years. So there's that part of it, which I'll get more to that part of it also later.
Sure.
So, so here I am. I'm getting a divorce again. So here's divorce number 3, and I'm like 30 something years old, right? And then I meet somebody, and this person's not a drinker. He's not a drinker at all. Like socially, really, he's one of those
take it or leave it kind of
man. It was incredible. And he would say to me sometimes, hey, I think you're drinking too much. And at one point he did say to me, I could never marry you because of the amount that you drink. And I was like, I don't want to marry you anyway, so it don't matter. I'm gonna keep on drinking my wine.
Right.
Like he was a stay-at-home dad. I was earning a really good income for at the time, and it just seemed to be careening faster, like into the wall. I was starting to drink earlier, and I was very agitated all the time, unless I had a drink.
At any point in time, did it start creeping into like your ability to like continue to perform at a high level?
No.
Or that paid space you kept completely protected.
Yeah.
And you were good to go.
Him and I were together for 10 years. I opened a sporting goods store during that time. Mm-hmm. I opened a screen printing shop. Like, I'm a serial entrepreneur, so if I have an idea, I execute it. And I've just figured out a way. Like, I've never been I'm not rich. I don't have a lot of money, but I'm smart on how to make money, or to figure out how to my resources to get things moving. So, and that was one of the reasons that I got divorced from my 2 kids' dad, was because I had this sporting goods store, and he thought women should not be working, and they definitely should not be owning a sporting goods store. That's like the man's field, right? So we had that disconnect. So then I meet this other person that I met through my sporting goods store. He had come. I was also like teen mom and all that kind of crazy stuff, like whatever. And he had decided to umpire for me because I had some girls. I was the head of the girls softball. I didn't have a girl. I was the head of the girls softball. He umpired. We met, and we started a relationship. He didn't drink very much, and he didn't really want to work. And so it kind of worked out perfect because I was working all the time, and then he would just stay home and take care of the kids.
So you didn't question him. He didn't question you.
No.
Right.
Like we had these, it was almost like we had these really 2 separate lives. And, he liked to hunt and fish, and so he did that. And then I would just sit home on the weekends, and I really loved to cook, and I loved to entertain. So, me and my partner, where the kids are young and football and baseball and all that kind of stuff. And so somebody says, like, we're going to rebuild this new concession stand, like, and I've been a team mom, so I've done the team mom stuff, like sat at the games selling Cokes and all that kind of thing. And so this, they say, hey, we're going to do this. Does anybody want to run for concession director? And my partner's like, you should do it. You love to cook, and I was like, okay, I'll do it. And so I love to cook. And then we built this crazy concession stand. And that was like my first like restaurant that I ever had, because we really went from where this association didn't make any money to being able to afford to buy like a smoker, and for me to hire people to work in the concession stand so parents didn't have to do it. We had like a full menu because we were out there 5 days a week. So we have this full menu of food that we're creating that are meals that people could take home with them. This was just like, was supposed to just be a concession stand.
Right.
I just
turned it all the way.
I turned it all the way up, and it became this like mini restaurant. And everybody was always like, "Oh my God, we should have all of our our playoffs there because they have the best menu." Like there's it's whatever. But one of the things that was like stuck in my memory about that time was that I couldn't wait till the end of the day at 9:00. Couldn't drink obviously while like I'm running this concession stand at a kids football baseball field till 9:00. And I remember just like going out to my car and pouring that glass of wine into my plastic cup and just downing it because I just needed that wine.
Yeah, you need that shot.
I needed it. And that's when I realized it was a problem, But I never thought I'm going to quit. I never thought.
So what did a problem mean to you at the time?
No control. Like it was controlling me. I was hearing the things that you have always heard about, like that happens to people who are alcoholics. And I had always been like a little on guard because my grandfather was an alcoholic, and I did not want to be an alcoholic, but it seemed like it ran in our family.
Your grandfather on your mother's side?
On my mother's side. So he was like, when he was dying, he was still drinking beer and he had his leg amputated. Like that's how bad he was, but not like a bad person. So it was just like, he just drinks a lot, like, so.
I feel like that there certainly wasn't, you didn't know any better at that in that generation, right? Like that was just kind of what you.
Yeah, I mean, so then here I am, 40. My kids are grown up. They've seen me drink their whole like young life. They understand mom's wino, like, but not like it was a joke always. Because I was always entertaining and having people over and throwing parties and doing all kinds of stuff where, like they would just be, make sure Joe's glass is full, make sure her wine glass is never empty, that kind of thing. And then when I turned like 40, right around 40-ish, me and my partner started having problems. I didn't like where I was, like, at all, like mentally, emotionally. I never felt right. I just always felt disconnected from myself. And I was kind of like, not depressed, but I felt like I was running a game, like, and that alcohol helped me to run that game, to be like sociable. Because I found out after I stopped drinking, I'm an introvert at heart, but the careers that I've chosen have required me to be an extrovert.
Yeah. And
I'm also an empath, so which is developed after the alcohol, because I would have never recognized that in myself if I'd still been drinking. So I decided to go to Austin to go do this thing for Sprint, and it's like the first time I've ever been to South by Southwest. If you're not from Texas and you're not from Austin, you don't know what an experience it is, but it's a huge thing. In Austin, Texas, South by Southwest is considered one of the biggest music and art, film festivals. My first time to go to Austin, never been to Austin. I lived, I'm 40 years old, never been to Austin. So I go to Austin and it's like magical. Like all of a sudden I felt alive. Like, these are my people. And it didn't have anything to do with alcohol. It just had to do with like the energy of the city.
Good high vibrations. There's a lot going on.
And I'm a gypsy. So for me to make a decision to like leave, because I'm also an Aquarius. So if I leave you, I'm gone. I don't look back at any of those things. So I was in Austin, and my friend, he works for Motorola, and he and I are talking because we're running this whole event together. And I was like, man, I would love to come, to Austin. You can't. You got kids, and you know, like you have this boyfriend and everything else. And I was like, I would, I would love to come to Austin. So I consider this like one of my very first manifestations. Right? I said to myself out loud, I'm going to live in Austin. So I told him. He's like, oh, that's not going to happen. How are you going to do that? Like, what are you going to do? A week later, I get a phone call from my friend, and he said, hey, the hiring manager for Central Texas, which is the Austin area, has your position open, just came open, and he just announced it. I just heard through the grapevine, you should, try to go for it. And I was like, well, the door's open.
Like, perfect. It's my job.
If the door's open, so I accept the job. Within 2 weeks, I'm in Austin. Like, it didn't even take me a month.
So you picked up the whole family?
No, I left.
Okay.
I did my mom, except that everybody knew where I was, and I was coming home every weekend. But I did leave. And my oldest son, so I'm gonna back up a little bit. My oldest son, Kenny, he came with me, and Kenny had some pretty serious issues in his lifetime with drugs and alcohol from an early age. And more so like marijuana and those kind of things. And then he started, like drinking. But he was my, he was my baby. He was my oldest son, and I was like his only parent because his dad really didn't have. When I said, "Hey, you don't have to have anything to do with him," his dad took that literally and never had anything to do with him. So we moved to Austin. Me and Kenny moved to Austin, and he doesn't know anybody there, and he's trying to get sober. Like, he got sober in Austin.
How old is your son at this time?
He was probably 19 at the time.
Okay.
Yeah. So he
had been struggling for a minute. Even at 19, he was pretty deep.
I'm going to go back one more step. So he was hit by a car when he was 18,
Okay.
and it was a pretty serious accident. He was in a coma for a week, and then they said he probably would never walk again. And so we spent a lot of time in that year between when he got hit by the car and moving to Austin, that he was in a lot of rehab and like making some changes in his own life because he didn't want to live that way anymore either. So he wanted to move to Austin for a fresh start.
Mm-hmm.
And so he started going to AA, and he loved it. He loved the community. He loved making friends. He was staying sober, and he was always like, "Mom, you should stop drinking. You should come to a meeting with me." And I was like, "Oh, Kenny, that's your thing, not mine." Like, I have a high pressure job. I didn't really have a high pressure job. Like, it was not high pressure at all. It was a great job.
Right.
And so him and I are in Austin, and I'm like on the treadmill. I don't know anybody in Austin, and haven't made any friends yet. And I'm watching TV, like Food Network, because I love to cook. And all of a sudden, I see an ad for like Cordon Bleu in Austin, and I'm like, how do I not know that this school is here? Like, because I had been investigating culinary schools as a bucket list thing, and so I make an appointment, go to the school, and I walk in there, and I know like I'm supposed to be there. So we start to go fill out the paperwork, and the lady's like, it's kind of hard to get the loan because it's like $65,000 or $70,000 for a culinary degree loan, a 2-year program.
Yeah.
And she said, you might have to have somebody co-sign for you sometimes. And I was like, okay. I call my sister, say, hey, I want to do this, and would you help me if I need help? And she said, sure, I'll help you. Lady came back in the room. She's like, oh, you qualified by yourself. You don't have to worry about it. So I was like, great. When do I start? So I started like 2 weeks later.
So you're now starting culinary school. You're still working full time at Sprint, right? Okay.
Living in Austin. My first week in culinary school, first couple of days in culinary school, I get a phone call. My mom is in ICU, and she had hepatitis C. She had Hep C for a long time, and she had just been given a clear, like, her and I were not speaking at all. But she'd been given a clean bill of health in December, and here we are in January. And they said, your mom's on life support right now. You guys all need to get here because, there's her organs are shutting down. There's nothing we can do to save her. The Hep C. So get in the car. I'm like mad because I have to go, here I just started culinary school, and now I got to go do this. And we get there, all my brothers and sisters, and they put my mom on life support, and she dies right there. And I was still mad at her, I was still mad at her because I just started culinary school. And I just wanted her to be there to see me and be proud of me, So anyway, I move on and I go to culinary school, and that is when the drinking really escalated because in school, the culture around the students is a lot of drinking while you're in culinary school. And so we would, like I was at work all day. I'd go to culinary school from 5 to 10. We'd go home. We'd have homework every single night. So everybody would come over to my house. We'd all study and drink till like 2 or 3 in the morning. Then I had to get up and go to work the next day.
Yeah, it's a pretty intense schedule.
It was. And so at that point, during that point, I decided somebody offered me a position working for them, doing kind of the same thing as my job at Sprint, and it would allow me more flexibility because it was less hours and I'd be like on my own schedule. I didn't have to show up at an office. And I negotiated with my boss. Everybody understood. They said, you're going to culinary school. We get it, but you don't want to work for us full time. So I wound up leaving Sprint for just a very short period of time. And my son Kenny is still sober. He's still living with us and everything. And then culinary school finishes, and I'm leaving Austin because I want to go back to my kids. I had this.
Did you bring Kenny with you? You were with
Kenny came back
okay.
with me. Yeah, Kenny came back with me. We moved back to Austin, and my other two kids are at the time they were. I want to say they were 14, 15 at the time. They were just entering high school. They just entered high school, and so we come back, and then I get a job. Actually, I get a phone call from somebody who says, "Hey, I just heard that you just graduated from culinary school. I have a football player I'm working with. He needs a chef for an event. Can you come do it?" So I was like, "I guess so." Like, I did not expect to use a culinary degree. Like, I thought I was going to go back to Fort Worth. I actually started again back with Sprint. They were very eager to have me back again, so I started back with Sprint. I had my job, and then I went and did this event, and then the football player asked the next week, "Can you be my personal chef?" So I can't like do that full time, like because I have this job. And he's like, "It's cool. I just need you to meal prep for me, like even for dinner. What I really need is somebody to cook my dinner and then like have my food ready for the rest of it." So I got this job working for this chef, for this football player, and so cool. I got to meet a lot of people. I got to cook for Ludacris, Gabrielle Union. I got to be on cribs with him. This is pretty exciting. And then I started working for other football players. And then that's when everything really started spinning out of control because I had this full-time job and I was doing all this stuff with these football players. And I was so stressed out all the time. But I didn't know how to get myself out of that situation because I didn't have to say no. I didn't have to say no. And my son Kenny, he started doing drugs again. And he started drinking again. And he met a girl, and so they have this really volatile relationship, and he moves in with her, and I'm like drinking like in the morning at this point, like just to get by. Like it was I had that experience at one point when I was drinking so much. This is when it first started. Was I remember thinking, like, why are my hands shaking so bad? Why am I so nauseous? Like, how do I make this stop? And I was like, oh, should have some wine. Like, I don't even know how that went through my head, but I noticed the minute that I drank it, that all of that went away. And it was just a little bit, it wasn't like I didn't drink a full glass of wine. I just had like, a couple of sips of wine.
Sure, yeah.
And I was fine. And I was like, oh, this is bad. This is real bad. I think this is like what happens when people are alcoholics.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, you must have been scared, like when
I was.
at that point when your body, you don't have any control over it, and the one thing that can help you level out is this thing you've already identified as a problem for you.
Yes, I was scared. I was scared to death. I was scared to death. But I didn't know what to do because I didn't know how to solve it. And so then I left Sprint again because I took a package and I went to go work for somebody who got some angel funding, and that did not happen. Like we literally a bunch of us left from Sprint at the same time, and within 6 weeks we were all laid off because their funding never came through. So then here I'm depressed. I still have my football player that I'm cooking for. I'm in a relationship with a new person. My son is living with me. My sons are kind of living with me, but I'm a mess, man. I was a hot mess. Like I didn't know when I was if I was coming and going, and that escalated on that, like having to drink all the time. And so my partner that I was with at the time didn't understand it because he didn't drink at all, like never. And he didn't understand it. And I decided at that point, hey, I'm going to go to AA. You know, like my sister went to AA and she got sober. So I'm going to start going to AA. And, you know, maybe like then I don't have to drink anymore. If I go to AA, I don't have to drink anymore, right? So I go to AA meetings.
That's simple.
Yeah. And I mean, I didn't feel anything. I didn't feel like I belonged there. I mean, I would hear the stories, and I would think they get it because they're like me, but like these aren't my people, whatever. And I remember at that point that I was watching Intervention because I'd stay up really late. My partner he worked the night shift, so I'd stay up really late, and I started watching Intervention, and I got really scared because I thought, what if this happens to me? Like now I gotta like watch all the time, you know, like what if it happens to me?
Right.
And so fast forward to a few months later, and I get my first DWI. I had managed to not get one, God knows how, for all those years, driving around with emergency wine in my car, drinking it the whole time. But I get my first DWI, and I was coming home from a party I had done, and I had been doing wine tasting, you know, so I get my first DWI. And my partner's furious, you know, like he said, I knew this was going to happen, you know, because you drink, you know, all the time. You should be drinking. He just didn't understand like how to deal with it. So I come home, and after my first DWI, and like I'm basically like housebound, telling me you can't go. We don't want you to drive in the car or anything. Weird part was they didn't have to worry about it because all I had to do is walk across the street, and there's from the house I lived in. So it was really easy for me to get alcohol. And I was alone most of the time. I was so depressed. And then I have another DWI.
So you got back behind the wheel.
I got back behind the wheel and I get another DWI. Same thing. I'm doing a party. I'm driving home. This time I got the DWI in Austin because I was in Austin doing a party, helping out my chef friends. And I had just turned like down the wrong road or whatever. And I got pulled over. My car is full of wine because the event was a wine event. And I go to jail and I'm in jail overnight. The first time I'd only been in jail for like an hour. The next time I'm in jail overnight, and he's really pissed. Really pissed. He's like, now, you know, like number 2.
Yeah.
How's that going to look?
So second DWI, you're overnight in jail.
Mhm.
Your husband is furious, still doesn't know how to deal with the situation.
Yeah.
And what the hell are you doing?
I'm just like, how do I get myself out of this mess?
Okay.
So I get home, and then they set my court date. And I get to court, and they say, you know, like you have to, we'll like, defer whatever. I don't even know what it's called, but I had to go to jail for 3 days. I had to spend time in jail as part of my, but I still, because it was 2 DWIs, neither of them were felonies, they were both misdemeanors, that I would have to be on probation. So I go to jail, and I mean, so scared. I'm so scared because I'm in jail for DWIs. I don't, and I had to go to jail in Austin because that's where my second DWI was. So my friend gives me like a Valium because I'm like, I'm going to be here for 3 days and I don't know what to do, you know, like for 3 days. I don't even, what does jail look like, you know? So she gives me a Valium, and I take it, and that night they book me, and I go to jail, and I'm in jail, and I'm sitting there thinking, I'm in jail because of my DWI. Like, how?
Yeah.
How is this happening to me? And why? Like, you know, like what do I do now? How do I fix this? And I'm there for day 2, and then I get in on Friday night, like at midnight, like right about midnight. The whole day Saturday I'm there, and then Sunday morning they wake us up and they're like, "Hey, everybody's going to go to church." So go to church, and then we're finished with church, and they bring us all back to the big room, and I'm sitting there in the big room, and there's somebody that walks in, and it's a nurse, and she's like, "Hey, we need Joanne Hamilton." It's my name. Or kind of my name, but we need her to come with us to the infirmary. And I'm like, that value. That's all I could think of. They found out that I took that value. So I get a little golf cart and everybody's silent. There's actually the person that's out there was also a police officer, and then it was the nurse. So I sit in the back and I'm like, sometimes like I don't know what's happening right now. I'm going to be in such trouble for that value. Like that's all I can think of. And so we get it and we walk into the infirmary, and the lady's standing there. She has a piece of paper, and all I see is my son's name, Kenny. And I looked at her and I said, "Is he dead?" And she said, "He is. He's dead." And the only thing that I could think of to do was to say, "When can I leave?" And she said, "We already have that handled. The judge already signed the order. Your friend is on their way to pick you up, and you can go home. You can go home to Fort Worth," because I was living in Fort Worth at the time. And the shock just of my son, like them telling me that he had shot himself, and that it was in my house, and that I probably couldn't go home for a few days, and just try to be calm, whatever. I was in complete shock. He had been sober again because he had gone through very big bouts of sobriety his whole life, and he had been sober for a year right before his death. And the night before he died, he drank, and his toxicology came back, and he was high in alcohol and drugs. So he didn't leave a letter or anything, so we don't really know like what his, like what triggered that. Unfortunately, and we'll never know. So of course I'm a disaster. I go home, and all I can think about is like I get out of jail. My friend's got a big bottle of wine for me. She's like, "Just sit here. You're just gonna sit here and drink for the rest of the night." And I go home and I get through this funeral. And at this point, I was like, I don't want to work. I have some money. I'm fine not working. And I would just sit every day and just drink all day long. And my partner at the time, he said, "You should go visit your friend in Austin and spend some time with her, because you're not working, you're super miserable, and all you're doing is drinking." And I was actually like hiding the drinking from him. It was typical like bottles in the closet kind of situation. And he didn't like, he never caught on. He didn't, because he never said like, "Oh, I know you're drinking." He never did. There was a lot of things during that time where my behavior was pretty erratic, and other people noticed it. People were starting to say to me, "Hey, like, are you going to be okay? Because like we know what just happened, and it's horrible. But like, what can we do to help you?" And I would just be like, "No, I'm fine. I'm not even drinking." While I was. So I go to Austin, get on a plane, go to Austin, get to Austin, and I open my phone because I got an email from another friend of ours. She's saying, "Hey, my partner, he doesn't want you to come back. He can't handle your drinking, and so you just need to stay there." It shows to my friend. And at this point here, I'm really devastated. I lost, my son. I lost my partner, and I'm just wallowed in it for years. Wallowed in it for years. And I was on probation for a good 2.5 years, and I even had to have the ankle monitor, scram bracelet, because I couldn't stop drinking. And that was the only time that I actually did have some relief from it, because I knew that they could sense it and they would just take me up to jail that day. They tried to do some other things with me, and my probation officer was always so kind and said, "Hey, I can't tell you not to drink. I mean, I can because I'm your probation officer, but I understand like what you're going through right now. And for me, it's not very easy for me to tell you, hey, just stop drinking. It'll be fine. You just stop drinking, like." And I couldn't. I couldn't stop drinking. And about into year, like right after my probation was over, finally got the thing off my ankle. Like I could drink if I wanted to. And I stayed sober for like another like 6 or 8 months. And then it was just like the little bit. Like I was also working for somebody at the time. I was their house manager. And so I was doing lots of events for them. I was catering. There's always alcohol around. And I was just like, oh, if I just drink a little bit, just drink a little bit. And just like they say, what will happen is if like you start up again, you're going to be back at that same place. Exactly. I was exactly at that same place. It did not take long for me to be at the point where I was drinking all the right. And I remember like I would go, they lived in this really nice neighborhood in Austin. And I would go sit in the park right by them across from their neighborhood. And I would have that little flipping 4-pack of wine, and I would just sit there under a tree and think, here I am. Like at that point, I didn't have any money. So I didn't have any money left. I didn't have any opportunity. I didn't have a car. I was like literally like on my last leg. And not knowing like, what am I going to do now? Because all I do is drink and there's no hope for me. I can't get a job because I have to drink all the time. What am I going to do? Mm-hmm. And so I went to go to Fort Worth to go visit my ex-husband and was thinking like last ditch, maybe we should get back together, whatever. And then I saw him and she was again, and I was like, I can't do this. And I was sitting there, and my son had a grandbaby on the way. My son was telling me, Mom, if you don't stop drinking, you're never gonna be able to see your granddaughter. So that was part of like what happened. I'd been going AA, but I could never it could never stick. Like I would 3 months, 90 days was like my magic number, and then the day after 90 days I was drinking it. So I go to Fort Worth and I come back and I'm like, there's only one solution to this problem, and it's to stop drinking. And I don't know how I'm gonna do this. I don't have any money. I can't go to rehab, whatever. So I decided on a plan. So I decided I was going to stop drinking on March the 28th. And so I was kind of trying to like temper myself down because I was at that point where like I had to drink vodka like every couple of hours just so that I could not be sick. Like it was medically a very bad place I was in. Mm-hmm. And on that morning I woke up and I was like, this is the day. Dial 911 and I say, I think I'm going to die. And they're like, why do you think you're going to die? And I said, I don't know what's happening right now, but I think I'm going to die. And ambulance comes. My heart rate is like terrible because I had not drank in a few hours. Mm-hmm. So the physical symptoms were there, like I was in distress. And they take me to the hospital, and the physician who's in the emergency room that day, he had treated me before for detox. And he said, oh, you're back. And I'm like, yeah, I'm here. And he's like, so what are you going to do this time?
Look, I don't know. You told me.
That's exactly what I said. I said, I don't know what we're going to do, but you tell me what to do, and I will do whatever you say. And he said, well, you got to go to rehab. And I said, I don't have any money. I don't have any insurance, nothing. So he leaves the room and he comes back in. He's like, I have a place for you, and it's all paid for. And you have to do what I tell you to do from this point on. Are you ready? And I said, I'm ready. I am so ready. And they put me in detox for 3 days. And then they put me in a halfway house because my room wasn't ready at the rehab place. And so I'm in this halfway house where there's a lot of real proof. And it's not about alcohol. It's like people who are schizophrenic, people who have some serious mental health issues. Wearing the same clothes 2 weeks because I couldn't go. They wouldn't let me go home to get any of my clothes and then they'd give me sometimes they'd give me clothes, change and wash my clothes. I'm like, this is my sacrifice. Like, this is for me to have my forever life. And then I go to rehab, and I'm there for 30 days. First, they were only going to keep me there 15, and when the 15th day came, they said, are you ready to go home? Like, you're doing so good. And I was like, I felt like this one was going to take, like it was going to take. And I said, no, I don't want to go home. I don't want to go home. I want to stay here for just a little bit longer. So I got to stay the whole 30 days. And I come out of it and I go straight into a sober house. I get it. Had been in the restaurant business for quite a while and decided, like I can't do that because of the alcohol. So I go back to my original career, which was being an accountant. Mm-hmm. And I'd live in this sober house, and I did what they told me to do. Like I just followed the rules, except for one thing. I never, ever, ever went to pay.
I was going to ask you, did you, never. Was that part of the prescription, so to speak, or
Yeah, I mean,
and you just feel like I'm not
I'm
doing
like,
it.
this is not, it's an unpopular opinion. I know this is very unpopular opinion, and I hope this is not offensive to anybody because everybody should work their own program, whatever that looks like. And I feel like there's so much valuable stuff in AA. Like I would not have gotten, because my rehab was AA based. I would not have gotten sober without being in that rehab. But I also understood that the work that happened, and they say, you know, you should not, like, you have to find your higher power, and you know, like, it can't be you.
Mm.
And I beg to differ because I think the work that we do in recovery is us. Like, we can't do this. There's no magic sky man who just, you know, takes care of me every single day. Joe has to do the work. I have to say no to drinks. I have to, you know, be a kind person. I have to do all the things that they tell you to. I have to look at myself at the end of the day. Like those things I do. And
Yeah.
I want to recognize myself for the fact that I did those things. Not that I'm my own higher power, but I need to give myself credit for sure.
Totally.
That what happens and what has happened for the last, because I'm going on 11 years sober, what's happened for the last 11 years was the work I did.
Yeah.
I had lots of support, friends, but you know, like there's nobody, you know, standing over my shoulder telling me not to take that drink or whatever. So I had to do that work myself. So I
Can I ask you a question really quick on that? How much of that perspective is influenced by that time where you were just thrown into the church? Do you have any like residual feelings
That's interesting that you say that.
okay.
That's interesting that you say that because I had always looked for in the church, and this actually was what I was going to say next. In church, I had always looked for, like, I mean, I'm a very spiritual person now, and you'll see it as we go through the rest of my story. But I wanted that connection with something, like, you know, I wanted, like, God, you know, like everybody's God, and I never felt it my whole life growing up. Even when I went to church, I never felt it. The day that I finally felt that connection was when I came out of rehab. For some reason, I felt like I had the spiritual experience, which is what they say that you're going to have in AA, right? Like literally, the craving was gone, the obsession was gone. Like I don't know how it happens. You know, like it's not magic. It does happen. You still have to do the work, but I'm here to say that my obsession never came back. So in my mind, I thought, this is what I've been looking for my whole life. This connection to somebody, a being, myself, whatever it is. I found it in sobriety. Like I was able to find my way and feel a closeness to some kind of power. And a lot of it was in myself. You know, like I was able to find that and never was able to find that at church. Never. So, and I just never went back to AA. I just, you know, I'm the person who sees the glass overflowing. I don't see, like, even when the bad shit's going down, I'm always going to be like, but you know, good thing is blah blah blah. Like, you know, like, so for me, sitting in Abrams, the ones I went to specifically were like the same story over and over again. I understand people need to bond, we need to build rapport that way, but I didn't feel like I needed that. I felt like it was time for me to take what I learned, you know, and I needed to be of service to other people, and so that didn't involve me sitting in rooms.
I was going to ask you because I mean I never was in a AA, but more than one class, one session I sat in and I never went back, and I've said that on this show before. But it's like, but community is still something that's important, right? As you're kind of progressing and you're looking for a connection to help prop you up. What did that look like for you? Did you find that in your service, or
No,
were you involved in other groups?
no, not at all. As a matter of fact, I was a lone wolf being sober. You know, like I wanted to stay sober. That's all that mattered to me, was to stay sober. And I even didn't date for 2 years. Like they said, don't date for 2 years. I didn't. And then
Because you weren't feeling it, or you were just like, I got to protect my sobriety.
I needed to get that brain fog and like live and figure out what I wanted to do with my life. You know, like what does it look like for me next, and how do I make this happen?
Yeah.
How do I become that person? You know, like that. I mean, if you were drinking as long as I was, and you were in that place where your body is in, you know, like it needs the alcohol, I feel like that's a little kind of a different story than people who just drink, you know, and then like black out and just, oh, I'm not going to drink anymore. Those kind of things. But I'm not saying that that's not, like big. It is big. It's every single, even if a person only drinks once a week, and to them, that's too much. Like that's all true. But I had to get like my physical health back in check again. Like I needed to really take care of myself. And so I stayed alone for a long time. I didn't I worked doing accounting. I had, a good job, like whatever. And then I decided, oh, I think I might date. So, like what's the easiest way? Get on a dating app, right? So get on a dating app and, like I go out on a few dates with people.
This is 9 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And, go out with a few people and then I meet this one person and this person is also a chef. And, I was not back in the restaurant business at this time. I was still doing accounting and those kind of things. Or I was just doing accounting because that's really I'd limited myself to just one job so I could just really go home and take care of myself and, figure out everything. And so I meet this person and we hit it off immediately. And the reason we hit it off immediately is because he was a narcissist and he was love bombing. So here I am coming out of, no love, in the desert of no love for 2 years because all that I had were people that I was surrounded with were the people who didn't drink, hey, good job, keep on doing this. So I meet this person who, who's just love bombing me. And the relationship goes really it's really fast. So he's a chef at a ranch and I spent some time with him at the ranch and he says, hey, there's this restaurant. It's down the road. It's been closed for 5 years. But, I think we could do a pop-up. What do you think? You want to cook together? And I was like, oh, yeah, of course I want to cook together. I love you. Whatever. So we get a plan together. We talk to the person who owned the building that was the restaurant before. And he was a barbecue guy. And it was a barbecue restaurant at its last inception. It had been over 25 years. It had been, a chicken fried steak place. We're in Texas, y'all. A steakhouse, a catfish cabin, whatever. And so we're like, let's do this pop-up event, see the community. And this is in the town of Sisterdale, Texas. Population 17. But Bernie is the biggest, closest town on one side. And if y'all have ever heard that song, Let's Go to Lucabot, Texas, it's on the other side of us. So we're in the hill country, out in the sticks. There's nothing but ranches everywhere that you look. And there's this restaurant that hasn't been open for 5 years. So we put a sign on the side of the road, one of those little flashing signs that says, hey, whatever supper club, Sisterdale supper club, one night only. And, call this number. And so within one day, we sold it out. And I have not been in the restaurant business for a long time because I've been trying to be sober. I'm super scared. And so we do this event at this place and it works. I mean, it was perfect. The 4 chefs, 4 courses, 4 wines. He was even though he was a narcissist, he was very honorable about the fact that I never tried to coerce me in any way, shape. We had alcohol around the house all the time. But at this point, it wasn't it didn't bother me. I didn't care if people drank and, it wasn't, I never got triggered by it. So we throw this event and we're like, this is amazing. It's, what do we do now? Because this restaurant that we worked in was we could see ourselves in it, and we'd only known each other 3 months at this point. Right. So we leave and we go to Spain. We have a vacation together. We come back from Spain and we're still together and, he's a chef and I'm accounting. And then we talk about every single time we pass by that restaurant, we're we look at each other and then we look away. Wouldn't it be cool if that was our restaurant? Oh, chef's love a restaurant. So we asked them 9 months later, hey, can we do another pop-up? Because we thought, well, maybe we'll just start doing pop-ups there. And they were like, sure, just go over. We talked to them and they're like, hey, why don't you all just buy the restaurant from us? And we just both started laughing. We don't have any money. How are we gonna buy the restaurant from you? Let's just do this pop-up. Let's let us do this pop-up. So we get all the plans together for the pop-up and him and I are talking about it and could we do this? Like, what does that look like for us? And then we're like, oh, that's right. We don't have any money. So I was like, I do this with my clients all the time. I figured out ways to help them make money, whatever, like I'm always like, my wheels are always turning. And I said, let's do this. Why don't we tell him that, or them, that, that we would like to lease it to own for 1 year. And then we'll pay this much. Because I did a budget, like how much we could sell, blah, 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 like what our restaurant, like not even a menu, not nothing, just like here's sales, here's, like what our expenses would be, and then here's what we can afford to pay. And then we'll tell them once we save X amount, like in that year, we could save X amount of dollars. Our number, which was outrageous to me at the time, because I had, like I wasn't making any money and he wasn't either. We were just poor, like living, but whatever. If we could save $100,000  1 year, that we can put that as a down payment. But we have to, like, the stars have to align. All this has to happen in order for us to do it. And then we want to offer them this amount for the property, because it was a 2 acres, a restaurant, fully loaded restaurant, and a rent house out back. So it was a lot, and then it was a large sum of money, like what they were asking for at the time. But we also knew that area had a lot of growth, and we were afraid if we don't say, like, we want to pay this, that, like 2 years or a year from now, like the population, it would be more. We don't want to pay more. We want to pay this.
Yeah.
And so, and then I said, and maybe we can ask them if they'll finance it for us, because we don't have a down payment or nothing. We're just doing this, 1 year. So we went to them that night. We said, hey, can you talk more about the, the restaurant, venue, whatever. And I just blurted out to them all what I just said to you. And they were like, sure. Like, literally, there's no hesitation, no nothing, just sure.
That's great.
And we were like, so the doors are flinging wide the fuck open. They're not even like, they're just, everything is just falling into line. So they said to us, and him and I don't have any barbecue background at all. They said to us, hey, what are y'all going to do? What kind of restaurant? Like fine dining? Because y'all are chefs. We're like, looked at each other. We're like, let's do barbecue.
That's just bring it right back.
Yeah, we're just like, just do barbecue. They were like, you guys don't even know anything about barbecue. We're like, how hard can it be? This is Texas.
Right.
How hard could it be for us to do barbecue? You already have a smoker out there. What? We can do this.
That's right.
And we opened a barbecue restaurant. So fast forward 4 years later,
What was it called?
It's still called Blackboard Barbecue. And it's in Sisterville, Texas.
Hey, also, if you're still here, you just finished off the part 1 of episode 31 with Joe. I think that you can grasp that this has just kind of been an unbelievable journey that she's sharing with us, and quite literally has, risen from the ashes. So the second part of this conversation, we're going to get into her entrepreneurialism, her, the work that she's been doing to this day, but ultimately opening up an award-winning barbecue restaurant in Texas. And we're just going to continue the conversation. So I hope that you come back next week to finish off part 2, and we'll see you then. Thanks a lot. I appreciate you guys listening to the Stacking Days podcast. I hope this episode added value to your recovery and wellness journey. Before we go our separate ways, let's connect on social. You can find us on TikTok and Instagram at Stacking Days, or via the website www.stackingdays.com. By supporting the show, you can play a direct role in amplifying people of color in their pursuit of recovery. The easiest way to do that is to subscribe or hit the follow button. This way, you'll never miss an episode, all while playing an active part in creating the ecosystem where diverse voices and healing matter. This show is for the purpose of education and connection and is not a replacement for therapy or recovery care. For more information on the resources and support available, take a look at SAMHSA and some other resources shared in the description. Until we meet again, be well, one day at a time.